They called it Willow Run, but nobody outside really knew what happened there. In the middle of rural Michigan, surrounded by barbed wire and farmland, rose a city that didn't officially exist. A city that worked without pause, where daylight never reached the same people twice. Every 30 minutes, another bomber thundered out of its doors, wings stretching 100 feet wide, engines still warm from the hands that built them. But this wasn't the front line. It was something stranger. A secret war, fought not with bullets, but with bolts, sweat, and silence. This is the story of the hidden city that won the war, and the people who built the skies. Act 1. The Secret City. The Impossible Blueprint. December 1941. Pearl Harbor burned, and America woke to a war it wasn't ready to fight. The skies belonged to the enemy. Germany's Luftwaffe darkened Europe. Japan's Zeros ruled the Pacific. America needed bombers, thousands of them, and it needed them now. Henry Ford stepped forward with a promise that sounded like madness. "Give me the contract, and I'll build you a bomber every hour." Military officials laughed. Engineers called it impossible. A B-24 Liberator wasn't a car. It was a 4-engine fortress weighing 36,000 pounds, with 1.2 million parts, 360,000 rivets, and electrical systems more complex than most buildings. Each one took months to build by hand. Ford didn't care about precedent. He cared about scale. The birth of something impossible. What rose from the Michigan soil wasn't just a factory. It was an act of will made manifest in steel and concrete. 67 acres under the single roof. The largest building in the world. So vast that when you stood at one end, the other disappeared into industrial haze. Long enough to hold 14 football fields. Wide enough that clouds sometimes formed inside when humidity rose. Over 40,000 blueprints, miles of conveyor belts, assembly lines that moved not in feet but in fractions of inches, timed to the second. They didn't just build a production line, they built an ecosystem. The plant had its own fire department, its own police force, a post office, a hospital with 30 beds, a massive parking lot that became a small city every shift change, bus lines that ran on schedules tighter than most railroads, and surrounding it all, barbed wire, guard towers, armed sentries at every gate, the veil of secrecy. Nobody talked about what happened inside. Workers needed special permits just to enter, badges checked at every checkpoint, cameras banned, visitors forbidden. Maps of the area showed empty farmland where the plant actually stood. Aerial photographs were confiscated from local newspapers. Families were told their mothers, daughters, husbands, and sons were, quote, working in defense. That was all. Evelyn Marsh, a farm girl from Ypsilanti, remembered her first day. "They gave me a badge with a number on it. Not my name, a number. Then they walked us through these massive doors, and I'd never seen anything like it. It was like walking into the belly of some giant machine. The noise hit you like a wall, the heat, the smell of metal and oil, and the secrecy. Nobody told you what you were building until you were already building it. They said they were making washing machines. They said it was agricultural equipment. They said a lot of things that weren't true. Tom Brennan, an engineer from Detroit, arrived skeptical. I'd worked in auto plants my whole career. I thought I understood production, but this was something else entirely. Ford wasn't trying to build bombers, he was trying to industrialize air superiority. He wanted to make war like he made Model Ts. Simple, fast, identical, unstoppable. The hidden community. By the time Willow Run reached full operation, over 42,000 people worked inside its walls. Most had never left their hometowns before. Farm girls from Iowa, factory workers from Pittsburgh, African Americans from the South seeking opportunity in a war that needed everyone. Women who'd spent their lives cooking and sewing, now welding and riveting. They lived in hastily constructed Bungalow City, rows of identical temporary housing that sprang up like mushrooms around the plant. 4 people to a room, communal bathrooms, paper-thin walls where you could hear your neighbor's dreams and nightmares. Mary and Rose Sullivan shared a bunk in Dorm Building 7. We'd write letters home, but we couldn't say what we were doing. Couldn't say where we were, really. Mom thought we were in Detroit doing clerical work. Rose would lie awake at night, and I'd hear her crying sometimes. Not from sadness, from exhaustion. From not knowing if what we were doing mattered. From wanting to tell someone, anyone, that we were part of something big. The plant ran 3 shifts around the clock. When the day shift left, the night shift entered. When the night shift left, the swing shift took over. The plant never slept. Daylight became meaningless. Some workers went weeks seeing only fluorescent lights and darkness, the living organism. By mid-1942, Willow Run had transformed into something unprecedented. They called it a factory. In truth, it was a city at war with time. A city where 42,000 heartbeats synchronized to the rhythm of hydraulic presses, where lunch breaks were calculated to the minute, where the distance between rivet stations was measured in seconds of human motion. Every element optimized, every movement economized, every person a gear in a machine building machines. But here's what the blueprints couldn't capture: the humanity that pulsed through those steel corridors, the laughter during lunch breaks, the photographs pinned to workstations, husbands overseas, children back home, the way workers learned each other's rhythms, anticipating movements, passing tools without asking. The plant hummed with more than engines. It hummed with voices, hope, exhaustion, and purpose. And slowly, impossibly, the promise began to materialize. 1 bomber every 63 minutes. Then every 55. Then every 40. The impossible was becoming inevitable. Act 2. The Arsenal of Lives. The Rhythm of War. By 1944, Willow Run had found its pulse. Every 30 minutes, a B-24 Liberator rolled out of the final bay, gleaming, complete, ready for war. The process was a symphony conducted in steel. It began with raw aluminum arriving by trainload, sheets so large they required special handling, cut by massive shears that sounded like thunder when they bit through metal. Station 1, Fuselage Assembly. Workers fitted the skeleton together piece by piece. The bomber's body took shape on massive jigs, precision tools that held everything in perfect alignment. 1 degree off and the wings wouldn't fit. 1 inch wrong and the plane would never fly straight. Station 47, Wing Attachment. The wings arrived on overhead conveyors, descending like mechanical angels. Teams of riveters swarmed each joint, their pneumatic guns creating a sound like metallic rainfall. Pop, 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 pop. 3 rivets per second, hundreds per wing. Evelyn worked Station 47 for 2 years. You didn't think about it as a plane. You couldn't. It was too big, too abstract. You thought about your 3 feet of wing, your rivets, your rhythm, the girl across from you working just as fast, the sound of metal finding metal. That's what you knew. That's what kept you going. Station 89, Engine Installation. 4 Pratt & Whitney R1830 engines, each weighing over 1,400 pounds, mounted with surgical precision. Mechanics worked in pairs, connecting fuel lines, electrical systems, hydraulics. One mistake could mean catastrophic failure at 25,000 feet. Station 134, final assembly, paint, instruments, guns, radio equipment, everything that transformed metal into a weapon. And then, the final bay doors opened. Test pilots climbed in. Engines coughed, caught, roared. The bomber rolled forward on wheels that had never touched ground before. And, 30 minutes later, another one followed, and another, and another, and another. The human machine. The statistics were staggering. 8,685 B-24 Liberators built at Willow Run. But statistics don't bleed. They don't laugh. They don't collapse from exhaustion or dance when the shift ends. The people who built those planes were more than numbers. 60% were women. Most had never worked outside the home before Pearl Harbor. Sarah Mitchell learned to rivet in 3 days. They showed you once, maybe twice if you were lucky. Then you were on the line. I was terrified I'd mess up, that my rivets would fail and a plane would fall out of the sky because of me. But the woman next to me, I never even learned her name. She'd tap my shoulder when I was doing it right. Just a tap. That meant everything. The work was brutal. Standing for 12-hour shifts, hands cramping around tools, the constant noise, a physical pressure that left ears ringing for hours afterward, metal shavings that worked their way into clothes, hair, skin, burns from hot rivets, cuts from sharp edges, and the accidents. A conveyor malfunctioned, crushed a man's arm. A woman's hair caught in a drill press. An electrical fire in Sector 9 sent 15 to the hospital. But they kept coming back. The 24-hour cycle. Time lost meaning inside Willow Run. The plant operated around the clock, transforming day and night into irrelevant concepts. Shift workers existed in permanent twilight, sleeping when the rest of the world worked, working when the world slept. Rose Sullivan wrote to her mother, "I've forgotten what sunrise looks like. I go to work in the dark, come home in the dark. Sometimes I dream about sunlight on my face, and I wake up, and for a moment I can't remember if it's Tuesday or Thursday, or if it even matters anymore." The cafeteria served 40,000 meals a day. Breakfast at 3 a.m., lunch at midnight, dinner at dawn. Workers ate mechanically, fuel for human engines, then returned to their stations. Exhaustion became a constant companion. Tom Brennan remembered, "You'd see people falling asleep, standing up, literally swaying on their feet, eyes closed, still holding tools. We had to implement mandatory rest periods, but even then, some workers fought it. They wanted to keep going. They felt guilty stopping when soldiers were fighting overseas." Letters arrived from Europe, the Pacific. Brothers, husbands, sons, writing about mud and fear and bomber formations overhead. Saw some B-24s today, ours I think. They looked beautiful up there. Hope you're doing okay. Miss you. The workers couldn't write back and say, "I built that. I built the plane that protected you." They couldn't say anything. So they built faster. Moments of doubt. But doubt crept in through the cracks. News filtered back. A bomber shot down over Germany. 37 lost in a single mission. A plane that failed on takeoff, killing the crew. Margaret Torres worked in electrical systems. Sometimes I'd be connecting wires, and I'd think, what if this plane kills someone? Not the enemy, our boys. What if I connected something wrong and it catches fire over the ocean? You carried that weight. We all did. The moral calculus of war lived in those hands. They were building instruments of death, bombers that would drop fire on cities, that would kill soldiers, yes, but also civilians caught below. And yet, those same planes protected troops on the ground, destroyed enemy factories, shortened the war, saved lives by taking them. Where was the line? Evelyn Marsh never found an answer. I'd seen newsreels of cities burning, and I'd wonder if my planes did that. Then I'd see footage of soldiers liberated from camps, and I'd wonder if my planes helped them. You couldn't think about it too much. You'd go crazy. So you just kept building. The breaking point. March 1944. A shipment of aluminum didn't arrive. A single supplier, a single train, a single delay, and the entire line ground to a halt. For the first time in months, Willow Run fell silent. Workers stood at empty stations, supervisors shouted into phones, engineers scrambled to substitute materials. Every minute of delay meant one less bomber, one less chance to end the war, one more day of combat. The pressure was suffocating. Evelyn Marsh collapsed at her station during the delay. Not from the work stoppage, but from the accumulated exhaustion of 18-month shifts. She simply crumpled, wrench still in hand. 3 co-workers caught her before she hit the floor. Someone brought water. Someone else covered her station without being asked. "We couldn't afford to stop," Tom said, "but we also couldn't afford to lose each other." The plant didn't run on aluminum and rivets. It ran on the people inside it. And we were breaking. Management implemented changes, shorter shifts, more breaks, better safety equipment. Not from kindness, from necessity. A broken worker was a stopped line, was a missing bomber, was a continued war. Victory. April 1944. The aluminum arrived. The line restarted. And then, finally, they hit it. 1 B-24 Liberator every 30 minutes. The goal that had seemed impossible. The promise that had sounded like madness. Real. When the first 30-minute bomber rolled out, the entire plant erupted. Workers cheered. Supervisors wept. Someone started singing the national anthem, and 42,000 voices joined in, echoing through 67 acres of steel and pride. For that moment, just that moment, they forgot the war. They forgot the exhaustion, the fear, the doubt. They had done the impossible. Evelyn Marsh, recovered, back at her station, looked at the bomber rolling past and felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. We built that. All of us. Every rivet, every wire, every bolt. We made something that would end this war. We were winning. Finally, we were winning. The production numbers climbed. 1 every 30 minutes became the baseline, not the peak. Some shifts managed 28 minutes, 25. At peak production, Willow Run produced 1 4-engine bomber every 63 minutes, faster than any other plant in the world. The arsenal of democracy had found its rhythm, and the sky filled with thunder. Act 3. The Legacy and the Silence. The end comes suddenly. August 1945. Word spread through the plant like electricity. Japan had surrendered. The war was over. For a moment, there was celebration, cheers, embraces, tears of relief, and then silence. The production line slowed, stopped. For the first time in years, the conveyor belts ceased their endless motion. Bombers sat half-finished on the assembly floor, wings unattached, engines unmounted. They would never be completed. They weren't needed anymore. Workers stood at their stations, tools still in hand, unsure what came next. Evelyn remembered the quiet. It was the strangest feeling. We'd been working so hard for so long, and then nothing. I didn't know what to do with my hands. I'd been a riveter for 3 years. Who was I now? Over the next weeks, 42,000 people walked out of Willow Run for the last time. Some cried, some laughed, most just walked in silence, carrying lunch pails and memories. The city that had lived without daylight, that had breathed metal and purpose, exhaled its final breath and fell still. The abandoned city. Ford didn't need a bomber factory anymore. The government didn't want to maintain it. By 1946, Willow Run sat empty, a ghost city under 67 acres of roof. The conveyor belt stopped, the lights went dark, the cafeteria served no more meals. Grass pushed up through cracks in the parking lot. Birds nested in the rafters. Tom Brennan visited once years later. I walked through those empty halls, and it was like visiting a tomb. You could still see the outlines where machines had been, still see the painted lines on the floor marking stations. But the people were gone. The sound was gone. It was just hollow. Parts of the plant were sold off, converted, repurposed. An automotive parts manufacturer took some sections. Kaiser Frazer tried to build cars there. General Motors used pieces of it. But the unified whole, the impossible city, was broken apart, scattered, forgotten. The forgotten builders. History loves heroes in uniforms. We remember the pilots who flew the bombers, the soldiers who fought beneath their cover, the generals who planned the campaigns. But who remembers the hands that built the wings? Of the 42,000 workers at Willow Run, most left no record, no photographs, no interviews, no medals. They returned to farms, to kitchens, to lives that had continued while they'd been building the sky. Mary Sullivan went back to Ohio, worked as a secretary, married, raised 3 children. I never told my kids what I did during the war. It seemed, I don't know, like it wasn't important. They'd ask about the war years, and I'd say I worked in a factory. That was all. It wasn't until decades later, when historians began researching Willow Run, that the stories started emerging. The women who'd proved they could do men's work, and then been expected to forget that strength. The African American workers who'd helped win a war for a country that still denied them basic rights. The young people who'd sacrificed years of their lives to a single purpose: victory. They built 8,885 bombers. They transformed American industry. They proved that impossible was just a word. And history almost forgot them. The echo remains. Today, most of Willow Run is gone. The main plant was demolished in 2013. A few sections remain as a museum, preserved fragments of something vast. You can stand where the assembly line once ran, see photographs of the workers, touch a rivet gun like the ones that sounded like rain. But you can't feel the heat, the noise, the exhaustion, the purpose. You can't see Evelyn at her station, hands moving faster than thought. You can't hear Rose Sullivan lying awake in a cramped dorm, wondering if her work mattered. You can't smell the metal and oil and coffee and sweat that filled 67 acres. The city is gone, but the legacy remains. Those bombers, built by hands that had never touched a wrench before, helped turn the tide of war. They protected troops on D-Day. They bombed German factories into rubble. They supported the island-hopping campaign in the Pacific. They were flown by pilots who never met the riveters, maintained by ground crews who never saw the assembly line, celebrated in victory by a nation that never knew the city that made it possible. What it meant. Willow Run wasn't just about production numbers. It was proof of what Americans could do when united by purpose. Farm girls and engineers, black and white, men and women, all working toward a single goal: end this war. No perfect equality. Racism and sexism still poisoned the plant. African American workers faced segregation even while building bombers. Women were paid less than men for identical work. But for all its flaws, Willow Run represented something profound. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things. They didn't have super weapons or perfect plans. They had aluminum, sweat, and will. And they turned it into thunder. Tom Brennan, in his final interview before he died, "People ask me what the secret was. How did we build a bomber every 30 minutes? And I tell them there was no secret. It was just people who decided that impossible didn't matter. The war needed bombers, so we built bombers. It was that simple and that hard." The Quiet Monument. There's a small memorial now where part of Willow Run once stood. A bronze plaque, some photographs, a restored section of the plant. Visitors come occasionally, history students, veterans, descendants of the workers learning for the first time what their grandparents did during those years of silence. They stand in that space and try to imagine 42,000 people working in coordinated precision. Try to imagine one bomber every 30 minutes. Try to imagine the weight of building a war. Most can't. The scale defies imagination. But if you're quiet, if you listen carefully, you can almost hear it. The echo of pneumatic rivets, the hum of conveyor belts, the voices of workers who built the sky. They called it Willow Run. They called it a factory. In truth, it was a city at war with time, a city that lived without daylight, a city built by hands that history almost forgot. But we remember now. We remember the impossible made real. We remember the cost of victory. We remember the hidden war that was fought far from the front lines, fought with rivets and wrenches and the stubborn refusal to accept defeat. And we remember this. Without those hands, there would be no victory. Without those voices, history would have turned out differently. Without that city, that secret, impossible city, the sky would have belonged to someone else. All that remains now is the echo of hands that built the sky, and built it again and again, every 30 minutes, until the war was won.